Welcome back, deep divers. I always say getting inside our own heads is kind of the name of the game here. Well, today we're taking that literally,
Literally. We are doing a deep dive into the two chairs technique.
and I am so here for it.
Oh, it's going to be good.
Well,
It's one of those techniques used in therapy that helps people work through, some really difficult emotions, past trauma.
right.
But the thing I think is so fascinating about it is that it's actually something we can all use.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be in therapy to benefit from kind of understanding the principles behind this and how it might even be playing out in your own life.
And that's what makes this deep dive so cool because we're not just going to talk about it. You're going to actually walk us through a mock therapy session. You're going to be the guide. I'm so excited.
Yes.
It's like we're getting a behind the scenes look at how this actually works.
Exactly.
And
We'll be focusing on how this technique, how the two-chair technique can be used to kind of address some of those bigger life things, past trauma, those big emotions, those hurdles that we all experience. But keep in mind as we're going through this,
yeah.
that the core principles here can actually be applied to everyday things too.
Totally.
Like you're going to see as we go through it.
100%. Okay, so for those who maybe aren't as familiar with this, let's just start with the basics. What exactly is the two chairs technique, and what makes it so effective?
Okay, so imagine this, right? Two chairs. Each chair is representing a different part of yourself. And so it's kind of like you're giving those internal voices that we all have
Right.
a physical space to be heard. So maybe one chair is like your inner critic, and the other chair is like your inner cheerleader.
Oh, I love that because we all have those voices, right? Even if it's not quite at cheerleader level yet.
Exactly. And so the technique itself involves you're going to physically move between these chairs. So embodying each perspective as you move.
Hmm.
And what's kind of amazing about this is that this simple act of moving your physical body can actually create this really tangible shift in how you're feeling and
Oh.
how you're thinking. So you're not just thinking about these different perspectives, you're actually stepping into them.
So it's almost like acting in a way. Like you're taking on the role of each voice.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, precisely. And that embodiment, that physicalization of emotion, it is incredibly powerful. And there's actually some really cool neuroscience behind it.
Oh, tell us.
So when we embody emotions in this way, we're really tapping into parts of our brain that are responsible for processing, like sensory and emotional information.
Really? So it's like we're almost tricking our brain into thinking that this internal dialogue is an actual conversation that's happening externally?
In a way, yes. And by doing that,
Right.
it helps us to kind of process those emotions more fully
Wow.
and even reduce their intensity sometimes.
That's so cool. Okay, so to bring this to life, we're going to jump into a little mock session here. I'm going to be the guinea pig, or I guess the client in this case. And I'm going to kind of tap into, I think, a pretty common experience, something a lot of us can relate to, which is
Yeah.
feeling angry about something from the past, but also feeling guilty for holding on to that anger.
Yeah. It's a great example. That's such a common, I think, dynamic that people experience is this, that push and pull of wanting to express those feelings of anger
Right.
and maybe even feeling very justified in them.
Right.
But then also this, well, I should be over it by now.
Exactly. Why am I still thinking about this?
Exactly. And that's totally where those two chairs come in.
Yeah.
Right. So in this mock session, what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of guide you to embody each of those emotions, the anger and the guilt, and we're going to see what truths they want to reveal.
I love it.
So you, our listeners, you're getting a front row seat to this kind of internal tug of war that's happening. And so pay close attention to the language that we're using, the tone of voice. Maybe even imagine what our body language would be like if you were watching this in person.
Totally.
Because what we're trying to do here is understand what are the underlying motivations, what are the whys behind each side.
Yes. And I think this is a good time to remind everyone, it's not about judgment here.
Right.
It's about understanding all those different parts of ourselves, even the messy ones.
Yes.
Right? And how we can kind of learn how to find some peace within all of that.
Perfectly said. Yeah, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I want you to start by really focusing on that feeling of anger,
Yeah.
that frustration, maybe even resentment.
Yeah.
I'm going to start there.
Got it. Okay.
Bring those up.
Bringing them up.
Now imagine yourself sitting in one of these chairs and embodying that anger. What is it saying? What does it need you to hear? Don't hold back. Let it all out.
Okay, wow. It's actually kind of wild to think about it this way, but here goes. If I'm really in this anger chair, it's saying, hey, you were treated unfairly back then. You were unheard, and it's not okay to just brush that under the rug. Like, there's this fire in my chest, and it wants to roar. It wants validation.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. And it's so important to like really sit with that anger, let it have its space. You're right, it's about feeling unheard, unseen, and there's this demand for validation there, which is like totally understandable.
Yeah.
What else is that anger telling you as you kind of tap into it?
There's this feeling that I should have stood up for myself more back then, you know? It's like in hindsight, I can see all these things I should have said or done, but I didn't. So now there's this leftover frustration. It's almost like I'm angry at myself, too, in a way.
It sounds like there's a bit of self-blame mixed in with the anger directed at the external situation,
Yeah.
which again is so common, especially when we feel, let down, even by ourselves, in those moments where we needed our own backs the most. Now, for a moment, I want you to shift gears, literally. I want you to physically move to the other chair.
Okay, here I go, switching seats. This feels weird, but also kind of cool. Like I'm actually stepping into a different headspace.
That's the magic of embodiment. Now, speaking from this second chair, the guilt chair, what do you feel? What's this part of you saying, especially in response to everything we just heard from the anger chair?
It's saying, come on, that was years ago. Let it go already. Holding on to this anger isn't doing you any good. It's just eating you up inside. There's this weight on my shoulders now, this heaviness.
It seems like the guilt is trying to protect you in its own way, right? It sees the anger as damaging, as
Yeah.
something to be moved on from, to be, put behind you. What else does the guilt want you to know?
Honestly, there's this worry that if I actually did let this anger out completely, if I really truly allowed myself to feel it fully, it would be like opening Pandora's box. Like I wouldn't be able to control it and it would just, burn everything down.
So the guilt might be rooted in fear,
Hmm.
right? Fear of the intensity of the anger, fear of the potential consequences of actually expressing it fully. And that's important to acknowledge. These parts, even though they seem so opposed, they're often trying to protect us, just in different ways. The anger wants you to acknowledge the injustice, while the guilt wants to shield you from further pain.
Wow, I've never thought about it like that before. That's really insightful.
What's so fascinating here is that we often label these parts as good or bad. We really, they're all just parts, and they're all just trying to, like, help us navigate the world in their own way.
So it's not about picking a side then, right? It's about understanding what each side represents and what it's trying to achieve.
Exactly. And this is where the real power of the two chairs technique comes in. It's not about silencing one voice to let the other one win. It's about creating a dialogue, a space for compassion and integration.
Okay, I'm ready to see how we do that. How do we get these two chairs to actually talk to each other? So how do we get these two chairs talking? Because right now it feels like anger's ready to like flip its chair over.
Well, it's about helping them see each other not as enemies, but as parts of a whole, right? And you've already started that by just acknowledging, like, okay, this is the role you play and this is the role you play. Now let's actually give them a voice. So back in the anger chair for a moment, what would you say to that guilt to help it understand why letting go isn't so simple?
Okay, guilt, I hear you. You want me to move on, find peace. But here's the thing. Pretending it didn't happen, pushing it down, that's not peace. It's just like burying it alive. This anger is a reminder that I deserve to be heard, that what happened mattered.
It's powerful. There's a difference between, quote unquote, letting go and pretending that something didn't impact you. Now, over to the guilt chair. What comes up for you hearing the anger speak like that?
I think maybe I've been so busy trying to keep things calm, keep things okay on the surface, that I haven't really let myself understand how deep this goes for you, anger. It's not just about that one event anymore, is it? It's about all the times you weren't allowed to speak.
You're getting to the heart of it. And that's, I think, something really important to emphasize here. The two chairs technique isn't about erasing emotions. It's about really understanding all those layers beneath them. What does it feel like for you both now that you're starting to actually hear each other?
It's strange. There's still tension, for sure. But it's like under that, there's also this sense of understanding. Like anger is realizing that guilt isn't trying to, silence it forever, just kind of protect me in the short term.
Mhm.
And guilt is realizing that anger isn't the enemy here. It's just trying to heal these old wounds.
And that is the integration we're talking about, right? It's
Right.
not about one side winning. It's about how they can actually work together, acknowledging that they both ultimately want the same thing, your well-being.
This has been such a trip, even as like a demo. I can only imagine how powerful this could be in a real therapy setting. But you said it earlier, We can apply this to everyday life too. So give us some examples. How can our listeners use this, when they're not sitting in a therapist's office?
It's all about the dialogue. Like imagine you're agonizing over a decision. Okay, give each option a chair. What are the pros and cons that each side presents? Or let's say you're feeling conflicted in a relationship. Imagine yourself in each person's shoes, not to justify their actions, but to really empathize with where they're coming from. The key is to give each voice, each perspective, space to be heard without judgment.
Oh, that's so good. It's like that saying, everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. Right. But this technique, it helps us understand those battles, even our own, a little bit better.
Exactly. And by understanding, we can start to find more compassion, both for ourselves and for the people around us. That's the beauty of the two chairs technique. It's a tool for self-discovery, for healing, and ultimately for living a more integrated and fulfilling life.
I love that. It's like we've been handed this, simple but powerful tool to unpack our inner world, which, let's be real, we all need sometimes. So, listeners, here's your challenge this week. Think of a conflict you're facing, big or small, and ask yourself, can you give each side a chair? What would they say to each other? You might be surprised by the insights that emerge. And a huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this deep dive into the two chairs technique. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those internal conversations going.